Thanks for tuning in this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller, and you have joined us on your Alaska weather. Tonight is July 16th, 2018. And as always, you can get in touch with any of the forecast offices at 1-800-472-0391. If you need to talk to a forecaster or have some additional questions about a local forecast, please give us a call. Weather.gov/Alaska is a way to see the regional perspective across the whole state. And from there, you can use the point and click feature just to keep clicking into your local area, perhaps even your own address. nws.ar.tv at tvweather@noaa.gov will get you to Mr. Dave Snider or Mr. Dave Percy, and they will respond to you if you have any TV feedback or questions as well. So let's jump on in tonight and let's start with our headlines. Thunderstorms lingering across much of the interior and the southeastern portion of south central over the Copper River Basin and some in the Susitna Valley. We'll see those start to wane as we go through the week. Marine stratus and fog plaguing the Bering Sea, and much of that is over the southern Bering at this time, but it will be expanding to the east. Strong system going to impact northwest Alaska up near Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. Those areas are going to see that system move in from the Russia area. And then a warming and drying trend for much of south central and southeast Alaska. So let's jump right in. And for our fire danger, you can see here, as of this afternoon, it is stretched up a little bit farther to the northeast and a little bit farther to the southwest, so a little bit higher area of high fire danger, and then just a smaller area of extreme fire danger. When you look at that on a regional scale, it doesn't seem very grand at all. Much of our area is very quiet across the interior, portions of southwest. So just a small area that we're keeping a closer eye on for any lightning potential or any potential fire starts. And as we dive into satellite now, you can see here that area is the area that's cleared out today, so getting more sunshine as we speak. Some thunderstorms have formed up in this area. You can see that kind of where that looks like a little bit of a freckle area here. Those are all little individual thunderstorms or individual showers. And then as you look down towards southwest Alaska, that's where the moisture really has continued to linger, but is slowly starting to dry out of that area. Let's put it in motion one more time. Starting to see some breaks, but over the Bering, plenty of clouds and low stratus with some patchy fog reported at some of the locations through the Pribilof Islands and down along the Cold Bay and Sandpoint along the Alaska Peninsula. As we look up towards the Arctic coastline, plenty of low stratus and fog hanging in there as well. Nothing real strong in the terms of flow right now, so we're just kind of seeing this moisture be stalled out across much of the area, and then showers really dominating across south central and southeast portion of the mainland here. Once we get over to southeast Alaska, still have some onshore flow pushing showers and some stratiform rain, but mostly showers into Juneau in the Sitka area. Let's switch over to our infrared so we get a little bit cleaner image there. You can see the spin there courtesy of that weak low in the northern Gulf, and that's helping to push some of that moisture up into southeast Alaska, so dropping some of the ceilings down and creating a little bit of light rain at just a few of the locations like Hoonah and Petersburg this afternoon. As we look up towards the interior now on the IR image, you can see there the next system is well off to the north, but just lingering moisture across the state with some thunderstorms and showers across the Copper River Basin and the Susitna Valley. And then it doesn't even show up on this satellite because it's so low and so warm, but the stratus is definitely out over the Bering Sea, and our next area of low pressure is going to make its way from west to east. And there it is on the surface map now at 1,011 millibars, sliding from west to east, and as you can see there, plenty of widespread rain coming along with it. The system is actually quite warm. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Quite warm with freezing levels jumping all the way up to 14,000 feet. So fairly impressive system for this time of year, fairly warm air attached to it, and plenty of rain coming with it as well. However, it's going to ride up against this area of high pressure that's going to slowly build. It's over the North Pacific now, but is looking to start to make its way up into southwest Alaska. And you can see generally the winds follow along these lines here, and these are isobars at the surface, and so the winds will follow that. So once we start to push this ridge up here, we'll get northwest flow through much of the Alaska Peninsula and into southwest and eventually south central Alaska. So that should help to ferry some of this moisture out to sea and push it down into the Gulf of Alaska. That will also bring an end to some of these showers, but not yet. So for today, plenty of showers hanging around south central Alaska with some thunderstorms, just a few strikes over the Susitna Valley this afternoon. As we get up towards the Brooks Range, that's where we have another weak area of low pressure, kind of a thermally induced area of low pressure because it's so warm in the places that were clear this morning. It has allowed it to heat up, and then it becomes convective, showery, and thunderstorms in nature. Along the Arctic coastline there and down through the Chukchi Sea coast and down through the Bering Strait, we see plenty of low stratus and fog, and visibility is as low as a half mile up there near Barrow. As we look down towards the Gulf and towards southeast Alaska, our area of low pressure is spinning just again a few light rain showers into southeast for this afternoon. But for the most part, this low is going to continue to weaken. Only 1,015 now, so pretty weak as we begin, but it's going to only continue to weaken and move off through southeast Alaska. As we slide through tonight, there you can see that system starting to work its way off to southeast Alaska just a little bit more. Some rain showers. This looks a little bit more ominous than it probably is going to be, but some rain showers will continue as that onshore flow continues to push some moisture up against the higher terrain, especially. As we look towards south central Alaska, some light rain showers possible again across the Copper River Basin, Susitna Valley primarily, maybe along the Chugach and the northern Kenai Peninsula, but really should be mostly dry for many areas. Highlighting the terrain here really is the key because of the convection that forms and hugs along the terrain. As you look up towards the Arctic coastline, there we see the decaying showers up there associated with that area of thermally induced lower pressure. Along the west coast, there's where all that fog continues to exist and possibly even some ringing out some light drizzle. We'll talk about that a little bit more in our aviation segment. And then our next area of low pressure at 1,012 millibars is going to just continue to ride right along the chain here until it runs into this area of high pressure. As we get into Tuesday now, you can see our area of low pressure that we talked about a little bit. This is what's going to bring some conditions of high surf along the northwest portions of the state. And so we do have high surf advisories in effect for much of the Chukchi Seacoast up through the Arctic Sea. Chukchi is out until 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning, and up for the Arctic coast, it's until 6 p.m. on Wednesday night. So check with your Fairbanks office for more information on those advisory headlines. As we look down towards the lower portion of the Aleutians and the lower portion of the state, you can see that rain continuing to make its way to the east with that area of low pressure. And once again, we'll have another chance for some thunderstorms on Tuesday afternoon across much of the Copper River Basin, but showers really should be waning as, again, that high pressure starts to bring some clearing skies to southwest Alaska. Southeast Alaska, you'll see some continuing onshore flow, bringing just the last little bits of rain to your area, but those conditions should be improving as we go into Wednesday as well. So here we are into Wednesday now, just some clouds and maybe some scattered showers at best. Clearing conditions, though, across much of south central Alaska with warming and drying. As this area of high pressure moves in and starts to produce some offshore flow, expect temperatures to start to climb slowly each day, especially areas that have abundant sunshine. This Arctic trough is really going to limit the amount of sunshine, though, for the northern portion of the state, as this is the remnants of what moved off of Russia and now comes in through the state, bringing plenty of light rain, some gusty winds up as high as 50 miles per hour along the coastlines there, and then some colder air. Not exceptionally cold air, but certainly for July it will bring a chill to the air. And then high pressure remains in control over the Bristol Bay area, helping to bring plenty of low stratus and fog to those areas. And our area of low pressure is just going to clip south of Kodiak Island and eventually drop down into the North Pacific and not really become much of a factor. So how about for our temperatures? Well, as you can see here on Tuesday morning, temperatures generally in southeast Alaska are going to be in the low 50s to upper 40s. Across much of the eastern half of the states, we expect temperatures pretty similar to that, in the low 50s to upper 40s. As we look towards where the cloud cover starts to clear out, that's where we start to see things get a little bit cooler. Upper 40s out here over southwest Alaska. Up over the interior portion of the state, we're going to see Fairbanks reach about 47 degrees overnight tonight, with the Brooks Range and areas northward hovering in the mid to upper 30s, staying a little bit warmer where the coastal areas are, and that's courtesy of all that low stratus and that fog. As we look down towards Bristol Bay and southwest Alaska, temperatures are going to generally be between 45 and 50 overnight tonight. And then out over the Aleutian chain, expect temperatures in the mid to upper 40s tonight. As we get into Tuesday afternoon, well, places that have the sunshine starting to break out, starting to see temperatures warm up through those areas. Southwest Alaska, up in near Lake Iliamna, and then off towards the interior portion of the state, 64 expected at Fairbanks, 62 at Iliamna. As we look over towards south central Alaska, you can see temperatures generally climbing into the mid-60s. Should be very pleasant. Copper River Basin, a little bit more cloud cover, holding things in the low 60s. And then for southeast Alaska, generally expect conditions in the upper 50s, right around 60 degrees. Continued cloud cover for you all on Tuesday afternoon, but that should see that dissipate by Wednesday. Up along the Brooks Range and the Arctic coastline, temperature is going to generally be between 45 and about 55 degrees up there. Again, highly dependent upon cloud cover. keeping things a little bit more cool along the west coast there, courtesy of the cloud cover, so temperatures in the low 50s. And then for southwest and down into the Aleutian, into the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures generally going to be in the upper 50s to low 60s, with a little bit lower temperatures out over the Pribilofs as the marine layer remains in effect. And then Wednesday morning, generally around 50 degrees for southeast Alaska. Looking for temperatures in the low 40s for the interior portion of the Copper River Basin as overnight it clears out. Going to be generally in the upper 30s to low 40s and then climbing to the 50s for much of western Alaska and upper 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. And then Wednesday afternoon, that's where we see the warm air start to move in and start to see plenty of sunshine moving across with lots of 60s and even some 70s across.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
All right, let's head on up into your flying weather now. And as you can see, up along the Arctic coastline there, some lower conditions courtesy of some fog and stratus up there, creating IFR conditions along the Brooks Range, all the way, Arctic coastline for the IFR conditions and Brooks Range for the MVFR, marginal visual flight rules. And then marine stratus helping to create lots of IFR across the Bering. When you have high pressure in July out over the Bering, you expect marine layer, thus lower ceilings and lower visibility, and that really will push all the way up against the southwest coast. Not penetrate very far inland, but against the southwest coast, expect MVFR conditions. Still going to have some lingering MVFR conditions as this trough takes its time clearing, primarily on the north and west facing slopes of the Alaskan Aleutian ranges as flow starts to push up against there. But eventually that moisture will be eroded as we get into a later time period. A little bit of IFR conditions over the Copper River Basin, and then for southeast Alaska, onshore flow Tuesday morning will help to create much of the area under IFR conditions with MVFR out over the open waters. Those conditions should improve as we get into the afternoon with some daytime heating, help to mix out some of those lower ceilings and visibility, so improving conditions to MVFR across much of the Gulf Coast and southeast Alaska to include the Copper River Basin. Some thunderstorms are still expected over that area in the afternoon on Tuesday, and then really it's going to be marine layer and stratus up along the Arctic coastline through Point Lay all the way down through the Aleutians, IFR conditions, worse as you get closer to the center of the Bering underneath the high with MVFR pressing up against the coastline. Not a lot of change with this pattern, so not a lot of change in what we expect for the conditions in aviation for Wednesday morning, and you can still see another system starting to approach here, bringing another swath of IFR conditions with it, and we'll watch that progression here in just a little bit. As we look towards the coastline, southeast Alaska still seeing onshore flow helping to create IFR conditions once you start to climb a little bit in the terrain, and then MVFR conditions surrounding this pocket of IFR out over the open waters. That's not going to change a lot by Wednesday afternoon. However, northwest flow will help to push some of this moisture off just a little bit, so it's really going to be banked up over the waters, not really affecting the coastlines here across south central. However, southeast Wednesday afternoon, still expect those MVFR conditions. And then that system is going to help to push some of that moisture up against the Brooks Range from the northwest, and that will allow those MVFR conditions to spread inland a little bit farther Wednesday afternoon. Still plenty of IFR conditions out over the Bering with the marine stratus. So how about our passes? Well, AKwx is going to be improving from MVFR to VFR, and the same story for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, similar story, improving to visual flight rules by the afternoon. Rainy as well, northwest flow developing, helping to create visual flight rules near Windy. And Isabel will also see visual flight rules by the later part of the day. Mentasta, you're going to remain MVFR through the day with some isolated thunderstorms possible in the afternoon. And Tanita, you're going to improve from IFR to MVFR through the day. Similar story for Portage and Chilkoot and White, improving conditions there as well. How about our freezing levels? Well, as you'd expect for the middle of July, they are way up there at 14,000 feet over the North Pacific, 12,000 feet over the Bering, and the only spot where we even get close to the surface is 2,000 feet here north of the Brooks Range. So plenty of warm air, and especially some more building out over the west coast of the state, and that is going to eventually transit across the state, helping to lock down that marine stratus out over the Bering. What does that mean for our icing? Well, it's going to be way up there above 12,000 feet, really out of the concern of general aviation. Above 7,000 feet, some isolated moderate across northern Alaska and down along the Alcan border. That starts to climb up above 9,000 feet as you get further towards the Copper River Basin and even along the north side of the Alaska Range. Over into southeast Alaska, just a little bit of isolated moderate, and then those thunderstorms, of course, applying some isolated severe icing if you should be near those. Jet stream is going to be moving from west to east at about 110 knots and then diving down across the state, helping to bring in some more dry air from the state, and that'll push offshore here at about 60 knots and then continue onshore for southeast Alaska at about 60 knots. Another weak portion of the jet supporting this area of low pressure. That's really our only concern in low out across the entire state this afternoon. And as we look at 9,000-foot winds, you can see generally in support of that low coming in from the northwest at 20 knots and then working back around from the southeast to the from the southeast to the northwest at about 20 knots and then up along the northwest portion of the state there all the way up to 50 knots. Across the Gulf, generally a west to east flow kind of hugging the terrain here, hugging the coastline, and that's about 15 to 20 knots, and then westerly flow across the northern portion of the state at 10 to 20 knots. Similar story at 3,000 feet, westerly flow across the Gulf, 15 to 20 knots. The sharpest turn down here, 25 knots, coming from south and then bending back to southeast and eventually off to the northwest, and then continuing to see the south to north flow across the western capes. So what does that mean for turbulence? Well, of course, expect some near the thunderstorms over the Copper River Basin on Tuesday afternoon, and then considerable moderate below 6,000 feet along the west coast.
They're called hooligan candlefish, cigarfish. They're really, really oily fish. They're a little on the mushy side, so we like to fry them. And we decided to go upriver about maybe half mile upriver and fish off the bank there. For me, one of the nice things about the fish is actually that there's a lot of other populations other than like the local Athabascans and Alaskan Native people that go down there and take advantage of it. There's a lot of Pacific Island people, a lot of Korean people, a lot of other Asian folks out there. They all love these little fish, and they all go out there every year and catch them, bring them home. I think people really just enjoy getting their own food. Obviously we don't have to, we could just go to the store, but it's kind of like the principle, you know, you go out there and you're going out there with your family and your friends and you're, you know, getting food. I take my family out, that's the way I grew up. I grew up in Nome. We spent a lot of our winter and definitely all of our summer subsistence hunting and fishing. And for me, I don't know, I just feel like it was a great way to grow up, and it's really foreign to me when people don't have those experiences. And so I really, really wanted my kids to, you know, have that experience and to know where their food comes from. You know, I don't want them just to think that all their fish comes from the grocery store or comes packaged in little packages of meat. Like, I want them to know that it comes from other beings that live on this earth, and, you know, for them to have some respect for that. There's a lot of other distractions, like my oldest son really, really likes Angry Birds a lot, way too much. I want him to learn to enjoy being outside and learning to enjoy harvesting your own food. When I was growing up, actually, my mom, she gets amazed by this, but we'd wake up in the morning, eat breakfast, and go out and play, and she would have no clue where we were or what we were doing until lunchtime. Then we'd come back hungry, eat, and then go back outside and play again until it was night. I don't know, maybe if the world's changed or just because she's gotten older or whatever, but now with my kids, like, she can't even let them out of her sight. I started working in canneries. I started working on the docks for a little bit, ended up on a tender, went over to Bristol Bay, so I spent some time commercial fishing. Then I actually traveled around the United States as a pitch salesman for a little bit. Like the dude who sells the ShamWow, kind of like the commercials that you see on TV where everything's $29.95, $19.95, $9.95. I would do that live starting at the Alaska State Fair. I stopped being a pitch salesman. I went to my brother's Marine Corps graduation, my younger brother, and when I was watching that, I decided that was something that I would like to do. And then went back home to Alaska and then joined the Marine Corps from Alaska. Well, we were scouts. Our job was to be on the ground. And so our job was anything that had to do on the ground. We were forward recon. We'd clear houses and stuff like that. Every time that we stopped, we'd do a sweep for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. I'm sure everybody knows what those are by now. Even when I was growing up, my mom said that after I got done with high school, I was going to go to college, and I wasn't going to college for me. She said that, you need to go to college so you can learn, and then you can come back, and then you can, serve your people, basically. I guess that just was part of the way that we were raised. I mean, even when we were out fishing, I wasn't just fishing for myself. I was actually fishing for friends and family as well. And it's not a burden or anything. I'm happy to do it. And the Marine Corps wasn't a burden either. It was kind of a pain at times, but I really feel like maybe part of the reason why I try to do the subsistence stuff so much is because the education that I want to get now is my UPIC education, you know. Even though I did grow up subsistence and stuff like that, we moved away right around the time that I would have been going out and starting to do things like seal hunting and, you know, going on the big hunting trips and stuff like that. So I never actually got to do that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to learn it all now, and I'd like to go home and I'd like to learn the Yupik language. I know some, I don't know enough, and I'd like to learn more, you know, about how we do things. My Yupik name is Mava. How we name is that when you're born, whoever has died around the time that you're born, you get their name. You know, so I got my name, was from my great-grandma, Mamie Seaton. Her name was Mava. I don't know what it means. I asked one of my uncles about it, and he just told me that the name was one of those, it was an old name, so they didn't actually know what it meant anymore. And so I think about that, about how far back that name goes. You know, if it's thousands of years, if it's 5,000 years, 6,000 years, how far back that name goes. And so it's just, it's a really tangible connection with my past and history, and it helps ground me and to know where I come from, and that I literally am standing here because of all the people that came before me on this entire planet. I think that we've become really arrogant and really disconnected from not only just like the earth, and I also hate how cheesy that sounds now, like people have made it cheesy to where I sound like some sort of hippie when I say the connection to the earth, but hey, that's legit. I mean, we are part of the earth.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
All right, let's take a look at your marine forecast, and starting off with our sea ice edge. From our forecaster, Mr. Sam Shea, we have seen that this has all pushed up a little bit further to the north and east. Just a little bit of analysis today done along the coastline there, helping to just refine basically what has been there. What we're concerned about, though, going forward with the forecast for the sea ice is when that strong system rolls off of Russia and comes into the Bering Strait there, what's going to happen with these pieces of shore-fast ice and marginal sea ice, and then what will happen again along the marginal sea ice here up towards the main pack. So keep an eye on that, or as we go through the next couple days, keep an eye on the analysis. And the reason that some of that is going to break up is because we have this warm water here approaching all the way up to 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, so which is almost 50 degrees Fahrenheit in some spots there along the coastline near Kotzebue. So with that, as that warm water gets pushed up against the main ice pack there, we could see some changing and moving and shifting of the ice. So be advised. As we look towards the southeast portion of the state for your marine forecast on Tuesday, Lynn Canal, you'll expect a southerly wind, 20 knots at 4 feet. And then as we look down towards Stevens Passage, 10 knots out of the northwest, Clarence Strait, 15 knots out of the northwest, and 2 to 3 foot seas there rounding out the inner passageways. Up towards the up towards the coastline there, the open waters, we can see a kind of a westerly flow along the entire coastline there. Kind of like we talked about in aviation, how that flow is hugging the terrain. And so 4 to 7 foot seas and about 10 to 20 knots of wind on Tuesday. Now into Wednesday, for southeast, you can see southerly flow, 15 knots for Lynn Canal and seas about 3 feet. A little bit more variable south and southwest, 5 to 10 knots down to the southern portions, and 2 feet. On over the open waters, generally a west to northwest wind, about 10 knots, and seas between 4 and 5 feet. As we look towards the south central portion of the area, you can see a westerly wind across the area, 10 to 20 knots, and seas are going to be on the order of about 1 to 3 feet in protected waters and about 2 to 5 feet over the open waters, a little bit more exposed there, coming around the bay, coming around the southern side of the Barren Islands. And then we get into Wednesday, and generally a south wind across much of Cook Inlet area and a westerly wind for Prince William Sound and just south of Resurrection Bay there. Otherwise, over towards the eastern portion of the Gulf, you can see generally 10 knots out of the south or the west as you get a little bit farther along there. Seas fairly light, running between about 2 and 4 feet. Out over the Alaska Peninsula, not a lot of change except for as we start to see that low approaching southeast winds, 20 knots, but otherwise kind of that westerly flow that we were talking about across the Gulf continues here towards Kodiak Island and up through Shelikof Strait, 10 to 15 knots, and seas on the order of 3 to 4 feet. And then as we get into Wednesday, you can see the wind starting to come around to the east now in support of that low. And so seas generally 2 to 6 feet in response to that, and wind starting to climb up a little bit, 10 to 20 knots. Near Kodiak Island, generally an easterly wind, except southerly there for areas south of AKwx and Port Heiden, and that's going to be seas about 2 to 3 feet. Over the Aleutian chain, you can see a little bit more flow around that area of low pressure, so westerly wind and then becoming southerly right in front of that front and southeasterly out ahead of it. Seas generally between 5 and 7 feet for the eastern Aleutians and then 7 to 8 feet for the western Aleutians. And winds are going to be all the way up to small craft on the eastern Aleutians up to 25 knots, otherwise 15 to 20 knots out west. Coming down a little bit on speeds for the eastern Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots, but variable winds as that front passes right through the area just east of Nikolsky. Winds are going to be out of the east and southeast ahead of it and then becoming northwest behind it, 15 to 20 knots. Seas between 3 and 6 feet there. And then west, southwest, and northwest flow 15 to 20 knots and seas 6 to 7 feet out over the western Aleutians. Southeast becoming southwest and southerly winds for much of the western Capes, 10 to 20 knot seas and, 10 to 20 knot winds, not seas, 10 to 20 knot winds and 2 to 4 foot seas. And then on into Wednesday, generally a northeasterly wind down by the Pribs at about 15 knots, seas 4 feet, but then becoming more southeast and southwesterly up towards the Norton Sound area. And with that, we'll expect about 10 to 25 knots and seas between 4 and 7 feet. And for the Arctic coastline, expect west and southwest winds 10 to 15 knots across the ice-covered areas. And then where that front is approaching, it's a little bit stronger, 20 to 30 knots out of the south and seas 4 to 7 feet. And then on into Wednesday now with that front moving through. Winds 35 knots out of the west up to 35 with gusts to 50. And then southwest 25 to 35 along the Arctic coastline. And some strong gusts there, though, expected with that front passing, and seas 7 to 11 feet. So a quick recap, some showers diminishing tonight for much of south central and southeast Alaska, another round of thunderstorms, and then our strong system moves into northwestern portions of the state, bringing high surf conditions to those areas. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.